Welcome everybody to our financial planning workshop. Also welcome to the folks who are tuned in on our webcast this evening. These workshops are sponsored by the American Association of Individual Investors, the AAII, and also by the Los Altos Library, who are kind enough to let us use this room. My name is Fred Smith. I'm a registered investment advisor and also financial planner, retired last year. But I've given you my email address there because if there are any questions that come up during this workshop or about any of the others, feel free to email me and I'll try to get back to you. I've also given you the website address for our local chapter of the AAII, which is where you can sign up for the webcast if you prefer to do it that way. Tonight we're going to be talking about Social Security and Medicare. This is the 8th in a series of 9 workshops. The first 4 related to investing in water farm, rather starting off with the fundamentals of investing way back, I guess it was in September or October of last year. We did 4 on investing. My favorite there, I guess, was the active versus passive investing strategies. That's always good for some interesting discussions. A lot of people have strong feelings on that. Then we did 3 on retirement planning. Last month we had the last of those, which dealt with safe withdrawal rates from your retirement portfolio. Tonight we're covering Social Security and Medicare, which sounds nice and simple, but it's actually a lot of pitfalls and traps in there, which I'll try to point out as we go along. And then next month, we're going to wrap it up with estate planning. I am not an attorney, so I'm not going to be dealing with estate planning from the normal viewpoint that most of you folks may have come across it before. I'm going to be covering it. We'll spend some time, describing wills and trusts and all the usual stuff, but not in as much detail as most the attorneys would get into. But I want to focus mostly on the practical aspects of being a trustee. What does it involve? Or if you're an executor in a will, what's involved and how do you handle it? How much work goes into it and stuff like that. So it'll be a slightly different viewpoint on estate planning. So tonight, Social Security and Medicare is the penultimate workshop. I love that word. Don't often get a chance to use it. Okay. All of the other workshops, the slides are online at this point, and there's a recording of the workshop online as well. So you can go to our address at the bottom of the screen there, and you'll come across the workshops there, and you can pick out any of the earlier ones that you want to follow and go through them there. So for tonight, we're going to do a little background on Social Security, and we're going to be discussing the benefits, the different forms that can take. Most of these key off your full retirement age, so we're going to be looking at how that's determined, and then early and late retirement. And then we're going to be looking at different types of benefits, retirement benefits, spousal benefits, and benefits for minors, and survivor benefits, stuff like that. We're going to spend some time on the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, and I hate to put it quite that way. That's the formal title of the act, and it's kind of key to a lot of what we're doing tonight, because a lot of what you thought you knew about Social Security prior to that act has pulled the plug on a bunch of the stuff for some people, not for others, and so we're going to be getting into that in some detail. And we're going to be looking at various claiming strategies, file and suspend, and the restricted claim for spousal benefits only. These are some of the strategies that were available prior to the Budget Act of 2015, and to some extent still are available, but not everywhere, not to everybody. And then we're going to wrap up with a few minutes on Medicare. We'll discuss parts A, B, C, and D, which probably most people are pretty familiar with. And then I'm going to look at what I call 7 Medicare myths, things that people think they know about Medicare that just ain't so. And we'll look at the reality of those, what's true about instead of the myth. Okay, Social Security. Franklin Roosevelt in 1935 passed the Social Security Act, which initiated, I think it was actually 2 years later that it actually got rolling. And at that time, the benefits were only to the worker. There were no benefits to anybody else. And you're going to love this. It was funded by 2% tax on the first $3,000 of earnings. If you work that out, that's $5 a month. And things have changed a little since 1935. Back then, there were 7 workers to support each retiree. That number has changed very drastically now. We're down to about 3 at this point. And back then, the retirement age was 65. That's still true for some of us older ones. The younger ones, it's moved out a little later. And the interesting thing to me, I think, was that back then, everybody was expected to have the good grace to limit their retirement period to 5 years. That's changed drastically. Back then, 70 years might have been the actuarial average age for lifespan. It's moved up into the mid-80s at this point, a little later for women, a little earlier for men. So that gives you the background of what we're going to be talking about. I want to emphasize again, this is a workshop, so if there's stuff that you don't understand, if I'm going too quickly on something, or if there's a question you want to ask, please feel free to interrupt me, because the last thing you guys want any more than I want is for me to stand up here for 2 hours and just rattle on about this, because you'll all be asleep by then. So feel free to ask any questions. If you don't understand something, chances are your neighbor doesn't either. And Al's already pointed out to those folks on the webcast, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat window, and I'll hopefully get to them shortly. Okay, so we said 1935 was the Social Security Act. A whole bunch of other benefits were added over the subsequent years. 1939, the spouse and minor children were included. 1950, there were COLAs made, the cost of living adjustments made to the benefits. Disability program was added in 1954, and 1965 Medicare was added in. Supplemental security income, SSI, was added in 1972. 1997 was the TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and that was placed under the SSA, the Social Security Administration. In 1997, the SHIP programs were added. That's the State Children's Health Insurance Programs. So when you look at it today, you've got all of these things lumped under the Social Security Administration, the SSA. And what people think of as the Social Security really is only part of it. It's the OASDI, the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance. That's what most folks are actually referring to when they say, oh, Social Security does this, that, or the other, or whatever the benefits are. That's normally the program that they're talking about. But it also includes the TANF and the health insurance for the aged and disabled, the Medicare program, which we'll talk about later. Medicaid is also administered under the SSA, along with the SHIP program and the SSI program. The SSI, by the way, is for low-income people age 65, but it also covers those people who are disabled or blind. I said that when the program initially started, there was the maximum earnings that were taxed with the FICA was $3,000. In 1940, 1950, 60, it kept going up and up. I just shown 10-year increments here just for your information. So by 1990, it got to 51,300, and then from the year 2000 on, I've shown it on an annual basis. 2000 was 76,200, going up to 118,500 last year, and this year it's 127,200. So the amount that the government has been pulling in from this program, the earnings that they've been taxing, they've been going up very, very strongly since the 1937 initiation. So where does the funding come from for Social Security? Everybody that's working is going to pay a 6.2% FICA charge on their earnings, but that's capped for this year at $127,200. So if you go above that number, whatever magic month that is, it's not tagged anymore after that. But you're also paying a 1.45% charge for Medicare, and there is no cap on that. That goes on forever. And your employer, assuming that you're employed, by a corporation, will make a matching contribution. If you're self-employed, you get to pay both halves of it, which amounts to the 6.2% plus the 1.45, double it, and you're up to 15.3%. So that's a significant hit on the self-employed. I think I mentioned before that currently there are 3 workers per retiree, as opposed to the 7 way back, when it initially started, and that's projected to drop to 2.2 workers, over the next 12 or 13 years. That's obviously putting a severe stress on those workers that are funding the program. This is, some folks think of this program as being, well, I've paid in over all these years, so I have this account, and I'm going to pull out from that account, when I retire. That's not the way it works, folks. What happens is the folks who are currently working are paying for the folks who are currently retired and pulling out of it. So they're pulling in with one hand, and the other, the retirees are pulling out from the same account, with the other hand. And obviously, the more folks you have paying into the trust, the easier it is for the guys that are pulling out to get what they want or need out of it. But when the number drops from 3 folks putting in for every 1 guy pulling out to 2.2 going in for every 1 pulling out, we're really looking at stressing the system fairly seriously over the next decade or more. I'll be discussing some of the issues later, at the end of this talk. That's only one of the things that's challenging the system. There are a number of others, and I'll go over those in a bit more detail, at the end of the talk. Okay, so folks are paying in to the trust fund, and some folks are pulling out. How is the amount calculated that you get to pull out? First thing is, you only get to even think about pulling anything out if you've worked for at least 40 quarters. That's 10 years. You must have 10 years under your belt paying into the system before you're even eligible to start calculating what you can pull out. The income for the early years is going to be adjusted for inflation. So if you were paying in mid-1960s, 70s, 80s, or whatever, the CPI index will be applied to all of those years to adjust them for inflation up to your age 60. After age 60, from age 60 onwards, it's no longer adjusted for inflation. So what the SSA does then is pull out the 35 highest earning years after they've been adjusted for inflation. And that's great if you've worked 35 years or more. I mean, supposing you've worked 40 years, from age 20, say, up to age 65, that's 45 years. They will pick the highest 35 years and average those. If for any reason you've only worked 25 years instead of 35, the missing years will be backfilled with zeros. So that's obviously going to impact your average. So what they do is take the best 35 years, backfilling with zeros for any missing years, divide it by 420, which is already the 35 years, just the number of months in 35 years, and that gives you your average indexed monthly earnings, the AIM, A-I-M-E. Then you're going to love this. The PIA is then calculated, based on the AIM. They take 90% of the first $885 in the AIM. You add to that 32% of the amount of the AIM within the range 885 up to $5,336. And then above the $5,336, they take 15% of it. You add all those amounts together, and that gives you your PIA, the primary insurance amount. The magic of the primary insurance amount is that that's the amount that you get to collect each month if you claim your Social Security benefits at your full retirement age, the FRA. I'm sorry for all these three-letter acronyms. I can't help it, but some of them 4 letters, I guess. The thing is complicated, and there's very little that they've been doing to make it any easier. Yes, we have a question back there.
Do they cap those at the same value that matches our Social Security, or do they go beyond that if you have to earn more than the maximum Social Security?
The question is when the SSA is looking at the 35 highest earning years, do they cap those years at the income cap that we discussed earlier, or do you get credit for any earnings beyond the income cap? The answer, I believe, is that they're capped. They just put in the maximum from their income cap on the earnings. That's what you get credit for. So at the full retirement age, if you claim your benefits starting at your full retirement age, you'll get the primary insurance amount. Obviously, from this, it makes sense for those folks that are short of 35 years to consider whether they want to work for an additional years or whatever to make up the 35, because it does make a big difference to your average. Yes, we have a question at the back. The question is your full retirement age 70 and a half, or is it 65? The answer is neither. We'll discuss it in great detail and some level of complexity. I think it's probably the next slide or two. That's a good question. The question is, if you do not have 35 years, but you continue to work after your full retirement age, do those extra years contribute to your average? And the answer is yes. So it may well be worth, for those folks who are short on years to add into to improve their average, working beyond age 65 may in fact be part of the solution. Okay, the lady at the back was asking about full retirement age. Prior to 1937, or from 1937, it was age 65. For folks who were born in 1937. For folks born in 1938 onwards, there were 2 months added for each year, up to 1943, when the full retirement age had incremented in 2 month steps up to age 66. It held at age 66 for those folks born between 1943 and 1954. Then in 1955, it started taking 2 month steps again every year up to 1960, when for folks born in 1960 or afterwards, the full retirement age currently is 67. So basically, over the course of that long time frame, the full retirement age has gone from 65 up to 67. Not in nice linear steps, but there were some plateaus in the middle. I've put down in smaller print at the bottom here some possible changes, because one of the things they're considering to fix the problems in Social Security is to continue to increase the full retirement age beyond 67, possibly in 2 month increments again, so that for folks born after 1966, perhaps, and this is only me guessing, there's nothing out of Congress yet on this, but it's certainly a possibility that for folks born after 1966, the full retirement age may well be 68 by the time they get there, going up to 69 and 70, at those later years. So the younger folks, a lot of them worry, will Social Security be there when I need it much later? I think the answer is yes, it probably will be there, but not necessarily in the form that it's in today, and not necessarily in the same amounts that you would get today. You will see all through this workshop there are ways in which Washington has been nickel and diming the benefits, cutting them back and cutting them back, and making us pay a little more, finding various ways to make us pay a little more. And there's absolutely nothing to say that that trend is going to change. I think it's likely to accelerate, and over the next 10, 15, 20 years, there may well be some fairly significant changes to the Social Security program, which will not be to the benefit of the younger folks that are waiting to collect it. But I don't think there's any way that the Congress could ever kill the program, because there'd be too much of a revolt. I mean, it's one sure way to get voted out of office. I don't think anybody in Congress would have the courage to do it. I mean, that's basically what I'm saying. So from this, you can note what your full retirement age would be. This is actually a simplified chart. There's the full retirement age is the key starting point, but you can actually claim benefits early or late. You can, in fact, claim benefits as early as age 62 if you want to, but there's a cost to do it, as you would expect. The cost is you lose 0.5% for each month that you claim early for the first 36 months, and then 0.5% for each month in excess of 36 months. I think, frankly, you probably need to be in Washington 10 or 15 years to dream up something like this. I have no idea what the origin of those numbers was, but that's what it is. And rather than do the calculations, the little table below gives you the math. It basically says that at full retirement age, you get your full PIA. If you claim a year early, you'll lose 6.7%. 2 years early is 13.3%. You lose 20% if you claim 3 years early. If you claim 4 years early, you lose 25%. Now that's for folks who were born between 1943 and 1954, and I've already defined that for them, the full retirement age is 66. It's a little more complicated for folks born after that, and we'll see that in a minute. So if you can take your benefits early at age 62 and pay a price for it, have a penalty for taking it early, the question immediately comes, does that work the other way around? If you claim late, can you get a premium bonus for it? The answer is yes. If you delay claiming benefits until age 70, your PIA increases by 8% per annum. And that's a significant chunk of change. I mean, whatever you were getting at full retirement age, if you wait 4 years, supposing your full retirement age was 66, if you wait 4 years to age 70, you get an extra 32% on your monthly check. That's noticeable. There's no increase beyond age 70, so there's absolutely no logic at all to delaying taking benefits beyond age 70. The question relates to the full retirement age of 66 for those born between 1943 and 1954. The question is, if you were born before 1943, does that change the numbers? And the answer is yes. One of the earlier charts I showed, if you flip back through your slides, shows that for folks born significantly earlier than that, the full retirement age can be as early as 65. And then there's the 2-month increments up to 1943 when it becomes age 66. So yes, anybody born before 1943 would have a full retirement age of 65 and change rather than 66, and that will impact some of the stuff, your prime insurance amount, as we'll see in a minute. What I've been talking about up to now is the are the benefits, really the first column of this. How does your benefit change for folks that had a full retirement age of 66, in other words, born between 1943 and 54? And, again, it shows at age 62, you get 75% of the benefit, you lose 25%. That's just looking at the first column under age 66. And then at age 70, you get the 8% per annum for 4 years, which brings you up to 132%. But for folks who were born after 1954, 55, 56, and so on, the full retirement age is going up in 2-month increments until you get to 1960, when the full retirement age is 67. And for those folks, they've gotten nickel and dimed here again. Instead of taking a 25% cut at age 62, they're now taking a 30% cut at age 62, or when they get there, so that they will only get 70% of their PIA. And at the other end, instead of getting a 32% bonus for waiting until age 70, they only get a 24% bonus because they're waiting from 67 to age 70, which is 3 years at 8% per annum rather than 4 years. So moving the full retirement age up, inching it up 2 months at a time, does take real dollars out of your monthly benefits. So you can basically all look at this and figure where you fit on the scale. As John pointed out earlier, for folks born before 1943, I don't have that on this chart, but it goes back the other way, and those guys do a little bit better. I said that in the mid-1950s that the cost of living adjustments were made. Just to put things roughly in perspective, I've given you the COLAs from 1975 on, including the Carter years. You can see that there are some years that they've got a 14.3%, 11.2% cost of living adjustment. That's a big bump, but that was back in those years when inflation was pretty high. Looking at the more recent years, you'll note 2009, 2010, there was a 0 COLA. Those of us who are already collecting Social Security noticed at the time that, geez, I didn't get a bump this year, did I? And in fact, for some people, it's actually worse because those folks who are on Medicare and collecting Social Security have their Medicare payments taken out of their Social Security check, and Medicare got bumped up with inflation, but Social Security did not get bumped up with inflation, so your net check went down for the year instead of going up. It's painful. So 2009, 2010, there's a 0 COLA built in. Same thing goes for 2015. 2016, I believe it's a 0.3%, not quite 0, but it's pretty low. And for the last decade or so, we all know we've been living in the lower inflation period. So if you look at the average for 1977 through 96, it was just over 5%. But for 1997, the last 20 years, 1997 through 2016, it's just over 2%. So the COLA is not making any drastic difference. And I guess that's okay so long as the inflation genuinely is low. But I think most folks kind of figure that the COLA doesn't keep up with their own personal inflation number. For a lot of retirees, their own personal inflation number is higher than the CPI because medical costs tend to go up more than the CPI, and some other costs do too. So your own personal number may in fact be significantly beyond the CPI. Any questions so far on this? Everybody happy? Okay, so I wanted to just give a little graphic on the benefits, taking in your benefits at full retirement age and earlier and later. And what I'm showing here, the dotted line along here, is for those folks who retire at the full retirement age, the FRA, starting at age 66. And I'm assuming, just for the sake of reference, that what we're talking about here is somebody that's entitled to $1,000 per month benefit at full retirement age, with a 3% per annum inflation and 3% appreciation. But those folks on the dotted line would wind up with something like total benefits over their lifetime if they live to age 100 would be about $1.3 million. For those folks who elected to take early retirement, you start at age 62, so obviously for the first few years you're coming out ahead, but then in the later years you drop back in your total. If again you live to the age 100, your benefits are a little bit lower, a couple of $100,000 lower for the lifetime benefits of roughly 1.1 million. For those people who are, I was going to say the optimists in the group, that's not entirely fair. Those folks who are healthy themselves and you have a family history of longevity and so on, that elect to go for the late retirement and get the maximum benefits, you're behind the curve for a little bit for starting out. But if you genuinely live out, as long as you expect out to age 100, you would wind up with about 1.5 million in total lifetime benefits. So you note that these all cross over in the early 70s or the early 80s, and that's not a coincidence, because the Social Security Administration obviously has access to all the actuarial data, and they've deliberately picked the rewards for delaying or the penalties for taking it early such that it's all break even if you pass away at the actuarially expected age of your early 80s. So at that point it doesn't make any difference which curve you're on. But if you have a family history of longevity, and if you're in good health yourself, it may be tempting to shoot for the green curve and delay taking your benefits. I'll be discussing survivor benefits in more detail later, but it's even more important for a married couple to have the higher earner delay his benefits, because the surviving spouse, regardless of which dies first, gets to take the higher of the two benefits, either his own or his spouse's. And to have the higher earning spouse maximize his benefits by delaying is a good strategy. Any questions? Okay, hope everybody's not asleep out there. Okay, I mentioned spousal benefits, so I want to just go over those in a bit more detail. The requirements for collecting spousal benefits are the worker must be eligible for or actually receiving retirement benefits, and the spouse must be at least 62 years old. If you meet those conditions at full retirement age, the spouse can receive the greater of his or her own earnings, or 50% of the working spouse's benefit. What normally happens is that the reason this was put in place was because in a lot of cases you've got a married couple and one spouse may be working and maybe the wage earner, and the other spouse may be the homekeeper and not contributing anything into the Social Security system, and therefore not have anything of her own to pull out. And the purpose of this is to make sure that even in a case like that, the lower earning spouse can draw benefits at least equal to 50% of the working spouse. This also applies to same-sex couples, provided they are legally married and that they live in a state that recognizes the marriage. So if they satisfy those requirements, then it's treated the same as a mixed-sex marriage. Question at the back.
What's the advantage in a spouse taking benefits early? Isn't it wiser if they want to take in the full maximum at age 70? Would it still be better along for the other spouse to wait till 70 as well?
The question is, what would be the advantage of taking the benefits early? If one spouse is delaying until age 70, wouldn't it make sense for the other spouse to delay until age 70 as well? I'm going to give you the usual financial planner weasel wording, which is, you all know it by now, it depends. It depends on a number of things, not the least of which is the health of each spouse, and whether they have a family history of living forever or dying early and stuff like that. And well, let me just leave it at that for now. There are reasons why it may make sense in some cases for one spouse to draw benefits early. On this chart, I've deliberately flipped over one little weasel wording thing here, which some of you may have recognized and others may not. I said the worker must be eligible for or actually receiving retirement benefits. If the worker is actually receiving retirement benefits, then this is all nice and clean and easy. I'm going to get back to what does eligible for mean, in a couple of minutes, because that refers to some of the more complex claiming strategies that we're going to talk about later. But just remember that for a spouse to draw benefits, the worker must be either actually receiving benefits or be eligible for receiving benefits, and being eligible depends on the bipartisan act of 2015 that we talked about. A spouse can take benefits early, but no surprise, you get dinged for taking it early. In this case, if you claim spousal benefits early, you lose 25/36 of 1% per month early up to the first 36 months, and thereafter 5/12 of 1% per month in excess of 36 months. I think you have to be in Congress for at least 25 years to come up with something like that. Just to put the numbers on more easily understood basis, if you take the spousal benefits at full retirement age, you get 50% of the worker's benefit. And then if you're doing it 1 year prior to that, you get 45%. Down to 5 years earlier, you get 32%. So it means that if you can take, if your full retirement age, for example, is 67, and you take spousal benefits 5 years early, instead of getting half of the benefit, you only get approximately 1/3 of the benefit. So you get dinged pretty badly for it. Yes.
It's irrelevant whether the spouse is alive or deceased. Is that correct?
The question says for the spousal benefits, is it irrelevant if the spouse is alive or deceased? And the answer is no. It makes a big difference. It makes a factor of 2 difference. We've just covered spousal benefits, and we're going to get into survivor benefits in a minute. And this is with both spouses alive. Everything I've said everything up to now is for both spouses of the couple alive. Yes. Another question at the back.
And so this only applies if your spouse has not worked in the last 35 years, or does it still apply if your spouse has worked all their life?
The question is, do these spousal benefits only apply if your spouse has not worked for the 35 years, or does it still apply if your spouse has worked? The answer is it still applies. For most people, it will still apply and is an option. Well, we're going to get back to the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015. That makes a difference there, but for a number of people, they have a choice of which way to go, and it can be beneficial in certain circumstances, if you're eligible, to claim spousal benefits only instead of your own benefit, even if your own benefit is there or could be claimed. We'll cover that in more detail in a few minutes. Okay, so we looked at taking spousal benefits early. Let's move on to benefits for minors. This perhaps isn't quite as important for most people, because in order to be eligible, the children must be unmarried, under age 18, or if they're still in school, under age 19. And there aren't that, for folks who are already collecting benefits may not have children that fit that age group. We have a question from the web.
Yes. The particular attendee says, I'm a retired teacher. Can you explain the windfall offset?
The question is, the listener is a retired teacher, and can I explain the windfall offset? And the simple answer to that is no, I can't. I know a little about it. It's too complicated to get into at this point, and frankly, I don't understand it, so I don't want to give out wrong information on that. Okay, so for benefits for minors, each child is entitled up to 50% of the parents' full retirement age if they're eligible, but there's a family maximum benefit that's really complicated. It's got more if-then clauses in there than most programs can handle, and it was way beyond what I could get into for this. But just be aware that minors under certain circumstances can claim benefits, and in some cases it will be useful to look into that. I should add here as well, I'm not an expert in this whole Social Security thing. If anybody wants to get into some of these nitty-gritty things, and some of them are big dollar issues, you really should make an appointment with the Social Security office and go in there and talk to them and double check what they tell you. I found that the Social Security office is not nearly as bad as it sounds. You can make an appointment and you go in there and you take a number and you think it's like the DMV, but in fact they will honor the appointment pretty well, and usually you get to talk to somebody who is fairly knowledgeable, but some of this is so complicated that they don't always understand it fully themselves, and if there are big dollars riding on it, you should probably double check it. I have a question at the back. The question relates to the 50% spousal benefits and the 50% minor benefits. If these are being collected, does it reduce the benefits that the worker gets? And the answer is no, it doesn't. These are in addition to what the worker gets. It does not impact in any way the worker's benefits. Another question from the web.
Yes, this gentleman says, with millennials coming into their own, they will like to have student loans forgiven and Social Security benefits only given to those that, quote, need them, unquote. In other words, means testing. How likely do you think means testing will be? If likely, shouldn't we take Social Security as early as possible so we get something rather than nothing?
The question relates, I guess it's from a millennial aspect, to whether the benefits are likely to be means tested in the future, and if that is the case, is that an argument for taking benefits early now to kind of sneak in under the wire, I guess. I'll be discussing this in a little bit more detail later, although not a whole lot more. Yes, it's possible that means testing will be a part of the future, but I still think that your overall strategy should be a long-term strategy based on your personal situation and your personal needs rather than what might happen in Washington. It's very hard to predict what Washington is going to do. In fact, I'm not sure that they know. One of the ladies, or somebody back there asked about survivor benefits earlier. Survivor benefits are a very important key to this whole thing and to some of the strategies that we're going to be discussing in a few minutes. A widow or widower can claim survivor benefits if, and I've listed the requirements here, the marriage must have lasted at least 9 months, the survivor has to be at least 60 years old, or if disabled can be older than 50. The survivor must not have remarried unless he remarried after age 60. Again, this is Washington lawyers at their best. I don't know how they dream up this stuff. I really don't. The survivor benefits claimed at the full retirement age are equal to the deceased benefits, including any delayed retirement credits that he or she may have gained, assuming that that's greater than the survivor's own benefit. What actually happens, in practice is that you get to claim the larger of the two benefits, either the survivor's own benefit or the deceased spouse's benefits if that was higher. But legally what happens is the SSA gives you your own benefits first, And then if the deceased spouses was higher, gives you the delta to make up the difference. You know, that's how it gets doled out in practice. Reduced benefits can be collected as early as age 60, and they're not in any way affected by the new law, so you don't need to keep an eye on that part of it. If you claim survivor benefits early, again, you can expect to get dinged, no surprise. So if you go 1 year before the full retirement age, you only get 95%, and I've shown you down to 5 years earlier, down to 76%. So yeah, you're going to lose if you claim it early, but there may be reasons to do it. I mean, if your own health isn't that great, or if you need the money or whatever, there are situations where it can make sense. But just be aware that nothing comes for free. The question relates to whether the FRA applies to the decedent or to the surviving spouse. The FRA we're talking about here is for the surviving spouse. The surviving spouse will get 100% at his or her FRA, will get 100% of the deceased spouse's P at that time. Did I skip one here? No, we're right. Okay, for divorced spouses, if the marriage has lasted for at least 10 years, a person can claim benefits as the next spouse, must not have remarried. And this part of it kind of amuses me. It's kind of interesting. It's a figment of the way the law is written. You're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 spouses or ex-spouses collecting simultaneously from the one worker, under certain circumstances. They would all have to have been married to him or her for 10 years, but if he got married at age 20, and again they were divorced at age 30 and remarried and so on, there could be 3 or 4 ex-spouses out there, all entitled to claim spousal benefits from that one worker, including survivor benefits. The working ex-spouse's benefits are not in any way affected by this. In fact, he doesn't even need to know that somebody has filed. Unlike the other situations where he has to, for regular spousal benefits, where the worker has to have filed for his own benefits, in this case, that's not the case. And like I said, he doesn't even need to know that somebody is making a claim based on his benefits, because the claim doesn't in any way affect his benefits. Under the new law, I'm going to read this and you get a chuckle out of it. If this is all gobbledygook, half of it's my fault and half of it's the SSA. What I'm saying here is lucky old fogies and tweeners can still file a restricted application on ex-spouse's record, but not the unlucky youngsters. The lucky old fogies is my definition for the 3 groups that the new law splits people into. Well, I find it easier to remember them as lucky old fogies and tweeners and unlucky youngsters rather than group 1, group 2, and group 3. We're going to have to get into the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 here, because from here on, even in the past a little bit, everything we say is dependent on where you fall in this group. The Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 actually passed at the end of October, I think it was 2015. And how it applies to you depends on which of these 3 groups you fall into. Group 1 is what I've called, my term, I'll take the blame for that, the lucky old fogies, because I can say that because I'm a lucky old fogey myself. That's for people who were born before April the 30th, 1950. The magic of the April the 30th is based on the law in 2015 passed at the end of October. It did not become effective, or could not become effective, for 6 months, which put it through to April the 30th, 2016 was when it kicked in, and that's where the April 30 date keeps popping into this stuff. So the lucky old fogies are those who were born before April the 30th, 1950. The group 3, we're going to skip down to those now, the unlucky youngsters who were born after January 1st, 1954. That means that they're 62 or younger on the beginning of 2016. Those are the unlucky youngsters, and they kind of got dealt out by the Bipartisan Budget Act, and they've lost most of the benefits. And then obviously, as the name suggests, the tweeners are the folks in between who got some partial benefits under some circumstances, but not under all cases. So we'll be discussing those. So you can decide amongst yourselves which group you are. You're a lucky old fogey or a tweener or an unlucky youngster. If you go back to the previous slide, where I talked here about the new law, the lucky old fogies and the tweeners can still file a restricted application. I'm going to talk about that in more details in a minute. Whereas the unlucky youngsters can no longer do that. Okay, we're going to talk about a couple of strategies that applied before the law change in 2015 to everybody, and then since the change only applies to some people. The file and suspend strategy is still valid for the lucky old fogies, but not for the others. What happens is you can file for benefits at the full retirement age. The date of the full retirement age, you go into the Social Security office, you make a claim that you want to file for your benefits, but I want to suspend them immediately and not actually receive anything. And in this case, you must have actually filed before April the 30th, 2016 to fall into that group. I first gave this workshop almost to a day a year ago, at the beginning of April last year, and I encouraged strongly anybody at that time, that was beginning of April 2016, that if they were in this group, to get into the Social Security office immediately in the next week or 10 days or whatever and file the claim. I'm not sure how many actually did. We have a question from the web.
This gentleman asks, if the spouse elects to take benefits 2 years prior to FRA, will they still be able to choose between the greater of that benefit amount and 50% of the other spouse's benefit at their FRA?
The question relates to taking benefits at FRA or earlier, and will they still be able to choose which benefit stream to take? And again, the answer is it depends. It depends on which of the three groups, whether they're an old fogey or a tweener or an unlucky youngster. And that's what's going to determine whether they can do it. We'll talk about that in detail over the next couple of slides. Okay, so for file and suspend, just said that the technique is to basically make a claim at your full retirement age and then immediately say, I'm claiming now, but oh, by the way, I don't want to actually receive any benefits. I want to suspend all future benefits. And what you're doing is waiting until age 70 or some later age, hopefully age 70, to actually start collecting benefits so that you can accrue the 8% per annum in the meantime. Why would anybody want to do this? I mean, what's the benefit of doing this over just not going near the Social Security office until age 70 and say, okay, I'm 70 now, I want my delayed retirement credits added in and ready to start taking my benefits. The reason for doing it is that if the person had filed and suspended, that's what it takes to make the spouse eligible for spousal benefits. Go back in your mind to a slide that I showed a dozen slides ago where I said there's some weasel wording here which said that a worker is either actually receiving benefits or is eligible to receive benefits. This is what we were referring to then. Eligible to receive benefits would be defined as having filed for benefits but then suspended receipt of them. That would make the spouse, if the worker was eligible to do that, and I think only the old fogies are in a position to do that, then the spouse at full retirement age or even earlier, well, at full retirement age, can file based on that worker's record, even if he is delaying his receipt himself until age 70. There's another reason for doing it, and that is that if the worker files and suspends the benefits, it allows him to an option to undo the strategy. If at some point, if at age 66 or whatever, he goes into the Social Security office and files and suspends, he still doesn't start receiving any checks, and it goes on and on, so he's age 67, 68. Supposing some emergency comes up, a health problem or something else, and he figures, oops, that was not a good decision. I probably shouldn't have delayed to age 70. He can go back to the Social Security office if he's filed and suspended and basically pull the paperwork on it. He can kill that application to file and suspend and say, things have changed, and I want to now take a lump sum. I want to start my benefits at full retirement age. Can you pay me a lump sum up to where I now am, and you pay me going on forward here as if I had filed at full retirement age. So filing and suspending kept open a fairly decent option to undo the early decision to delay retirement. Only one spouse can do this. Both spouses and a couple can't do this simultaneously. But that's what file and suspend is all about. Under the new law, if anybody applies to have their payments suspended now, after April 29th, 2016, the Social Security admin will no longer let you pick and choose what you're going to do. They will look at your record, and if you want to, they'll suspend your payments as you've requested, but they will also suspend anybody else that has filed based on that record. In other words, if you have a spouse that had been collecting spousal benefits based on your record, having filed and suspended, or that you were going to do that, and the SSA after April 29th says no, you can't do that, they will if you suspend your benefits, they will also suspend the benefits for any spouse or minor children that are receiving. So after April 29, 2016, the worker must actually be receiving benefits. None of this or be eligible for. That doesn't work anymore. A worker can still voluntarily suspend his own benefits. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but it's got nothing to do with what the spouse can do. For anybody who's already filed and suspended prior to April 30th, 2016, nothing changes. All of that's still in place. You're obviously a lucky old fogey, and congratulations. Restricted claims. Again, the old rules still apply for lucky old fogies, and in this case, they also apply for tweeners. What happens here is that a person can go into the SSA and file a claim that's restricted just to their spousal benefits. They can say, I may be entitled to some benefits myself, but I don't want to touch those. I want to let those accrue at 8% per annum until age 70. I only want to file for spousal benefits, and I'll be very glad to accept half, the 50% of the workers' benefits, in that time period. And obviously, the goal for doing this is a way to make the spousal benefits available while the workers' benefits are still growing at 8% per annum. And then at 8%, and at age 70, both spouses can switch to the larger benefits at age 70. It's possible to claim early under this circumstances, but I don't think it makes any sense. I'm not even going to go into the details in this. The working spouse must be receiving benefits or have filed and suspended, and again, only one spouse can file a restricted claim. Does everybody understand the concept of the restricted claim under the old rules? and how the new law has limited that to some people? Question.
Question about both the spouse and the new have to get a twinner and old program. One of the
Question is, for a restricted claim, do both have to be an old fogey or a tweener, or can one of them be an unlucky youngster? I think if you work through the math, it will not work for anybody in group 3, for the unlucky youngsters, because there's no way that they are going to be able to. They're in an age group that would not get them to full retirement age in time to make the claim. You almost need to draw out a timeline for the worker and for the spouse, and whatever delta years there are between the two of them and so on. Back in the olden days, one of the great deals was to coordinate both strategies, and for the lucky old fogies and the tweeners, you can still do that. At full retirement age, the higher earning spouse would do a file and suspend, delaying his benefits to age 70 and thereby maximizing the higher earner spouse. At the same time, at full retirement age, the other spouse can file a restricted claim for half of the worker's benefits and delay her own benefits until age 70, and then at age 70 each of them switches to his or her own maximum benefits. And this strategy worked best when both spouses are roughly the same age. But again, the unlucky youngsters can no longer do that because of the dates that I've given you earlier. If you plug in the dates, you'll see that they've been dealt out of it. I want to spend, before I'm going to talk about deemed filing, but before I get to deemed filing, are there any other questions on the file and suspend and the spousal benefits only? Yes.
The next slide you just put on right now. Is there any reason you wouldn't do that?
The question is on this slide, is there any reason why you would not do the strategy that I flagged here to coordinate both strategies? Yeah. Yeah. There is absolutely no reason why you should not do this, except the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 will only allow you to do it if you're a lucky old fogey or a tweener. But assuming that you're in the right age group, then this is a good strategy for a lot of people. The reason why you might not want to do it might be, for example, if somebody really needed the money early, one spouse might claim early at age 62 or something, or for health reasons or whatever, there might be a difference. But if both spouses are in good health and both have a family history of longevity, then this strategy would make sense for anyone that's eligible for it, and many, many people in the past have followed. Question from the web.
Yes, this is a variation of an earlier question, if you will. This particular gentleman is in, quote, old fogey class. Okay. Again, it's sort of, if the spouse elects to take benefits a couple of years prior to their full retirement age, will they still be able to choose between the greater of that benefit and 50% of the other spouse's benefit at their full retirement age?
The question relates to an old fogey who's wondering if he takes, I guess if he delays his retirement benefits, and if the spouse delays his or hers, can she take the greater of the two benefits at her full retirement age? And as far as I know, the answer is yes. The lucky old fogies can still do pretty much everything based on the old law, and that would still have been an option then, yes. Okay, deemed filing is basically the concept of where the SSA makes up its own definition of what you filed for based on when you filed. On the old law, if you file before your full retirement age, if you were eligible to receive more than one benefit, in other words, if you had the option of taking your own benefits or spousal benefits, and you filed before your full retirement age, the SSA deemed you to be filing for all benefits, which meant that you would basically have to take your own benefits first and then take the delta if it existed from your spousal benefits if that was higher. But, and here's the key to it, if you filed after full retirement age, you're then able to choose, you make the choice of which benefit you're applying for. On the old law, if you filed at or after your full retirement age, you could choose to take your spousal benefits if that's what you wanted, or to take your own, but it was your choice. But if you did it before full retirement age, the SSA made the decision for you, and you're kind of stuck with taking your own benefits early and forfeiting the ability to delay those. Under the new law, the lucky old fogies and tweeners are grandfathered in and can still make the same decision that I've just defined under the old law. The unlucky youngsters are, as usual, out of luck in this, and they don't get to make any choice. If they file for benefits at any age, the SSA is going to tell them which benefits they get, and they don't get to choose only spousal benefits so that they can have their own benefits continue to accrue the 8% per annum. So that's what deemed filing is all about. Yes?
So with a husband and wife, can each spouse take a spousal benefit?
The question says that with a husband and wife, can each spouse claim spousal benefit? And the answer is no. As far as I know, only one spouse can do it. Yeah, one of the spouses can do it, but the other has to either be working and claiming his own benefits or file and suspended. They can't both claim on they can't both cross-file for spousal benefits only. Okay, I wanted to talk about some of those strategies that we just looked at. What does an optimum strategy really mean? What are our options here? The way I see it, it's not immediately obvious, and most folks haven't really thought about this, I think, but I see two options that are not necessarily the same thing. I think you can come to different answers, and depending on which way you look at this. One rational opinion would be that you want to maximize the present value of your lifetime benefits. In other words, I want to get the most out of the system if I die, at my expected age after I've adjusted it for health and all the rest of it. When I die at that age, I want to have pulled out of the system the greatest number of dollars feasible, and that's what I want to optimize. The other way of looking at it is more for those folks who are a little risk adverse and perhaps I think may have thought about it a little bit more. And the question is, if I die early, I don't give a damn what the benefits are. It's the least thing I'm going to worry about. What happens if I live to age 95 or 100 and I'm running out of my retirement portfolio? What do I have to do to maximize my benefits at that point? And those folks are obviously going to delay taking their, collect all the delayed retirement credits that they can and delay taking benefits until age 70. It does mean that if they die early, they will not have pulled everything out of the system that they perhaps might have been able to do it the other way. But if they're dead, why should they? Maybe they don't care. I don't know. Maybe the spouse doesn't care. I'm not sure. But either of those, I think, is rational. I think you've got to look at it and see and decide for yourself just what objective you're trying to optimize. Let's look at the simple case first for a single person. A single person should consider taking benefits early only under limited circumstances, I think. If you need the money now, then you got no choice. You claim to get whatever income stream you can, and if it's at the expense of optimizing later benefits, so be it. If you need it, you need it. The other thing is if a single person is in poor health or has a poor family history, if there's no spouse to be concerned about later, you probably want to consider taking benefits early. Absent any of those, for most people in good health and with a good family history, it probably makes sense to delay taking benefits perhaps all the way to age 70 to collect all of the delayed retirement credits that you can. And if eligible, I think it would make sense to do a file and suspend here so that you keep the option open that if things change and you want to go back and undo the decision, that you can go back and get it and get a lump sum payment from the, if you delayed at full retirement age and then before you reach age 70 you decide that that was a mistake and you want to undo it, if you've done a file and suspend and you're eligible to do that, it allows you to go back and do it. Question at the back. The question says that if you're single and there's no spouse to get any benefits, why would you ever want to file and suspend? The answer to that is because it keeps the flexibility open to do a Murphy. You get a redo if things change. If you file and suspend at full retirement age and 2 years later the doctor gives you a horrible diagnosis and you figure, well, delaying to age 70 was not a good plan. In fact, I should have started collecting at age 66. It allows you to go back in time to the full retirement age, pull your paperwork, as it were, collect a lump sum for the intervening years. You can undo it if you are at the right age to be eligible to do it based on my old fogies and tweeners and all the rest of it. Yeah. So it keeps the option open to do that. And that's why I said that it's possibly a better option. Filing for married couples is a little more complicated because you have to consider not just your own benefits, but those for your spouse. And the key point here, and many people don't fully understand the implications of this. I believe that it's best to think of your Social Security benefits as being a joint annuity. And what that means is that the surviving spouse receives the larger of his or her own benefits or the deceased spouse's, whichever one is the better one. And that's one reason for optimizing maximizing the benefits for the higher earning spouse. For those folks who are into probability, or maybe they've forgotten all the probabilities at high school, if there's a 50-50 chance that you're going to die at the average age, that makes sense. But if you've got two spouses, there's a 25% chance that both spouses will die before the average age. It's 50% times 0.5 times 0.5, which means there's a 75% probability that at least one of the spouses will live beyond the average age. That means, to my mind, that, again, absent any personal details, health or otherwise, that might change things, under average conditions, it makes sense for, since one of the spouses is likely to live beyond the average age, it makes sense to optimize the benefits for the higher earning spouse. So for most married couples, the optimum strategy is to delay taking the benefits until age 70 for the higher earning spouse, and what this does is maximize the benefits for the surviving spouse regardless of which one dies first. That to me is a key point that I think many people who have just looked at Social Security real quickly have missed, and it's a shame. Some folks figure, well, it's not going to be around, so I'm going to take it early. I think that's a big mistake. Yes, sir, there's a question at the back.
So, here's a lot of permutations and combinations of this, but assuming, like you say, that the higher earning spouse waits till 70, and then the lower earning spouse waits to 66, then the higher earning spouse will still be eligible for spousal benefits. before they get 70 years old, that's the way
The question relates to the higher earning spouse waiting until age 70 to maximize his benefits, and if the other spouse collects at full retirement age, are there any benefits really to waiting until full retirement age to maximize those benefits as well? I think a lot depends there on whether the two spouses have income that's comparable or whether there's a big difference. One of the factors you have to look at under those conditions is how does the lower earning spouse's earnings at age 70 compare to the spousal benefits they would get from the higher earning spouse. So you take 50% of the higher earning spouse and use that number to compare to the other spouse and see if it's worthwhile to maximize those earnings as well or not. And again, it depends on health history. Are they both going to, if they're both going to live to age 100, you may get one answer. If one of them's in poor health, you may get a different answer. There are very few absolutes in this, but I think it is important to understand the concepts that I'm trying to give here and make your own individual decisions on. Okay, so we're talking about what if things change? Supposing you decided to delay taking benefits to age 70 for all the right reasons, and then maybe you suddenly need the money, maybe there's a medical emergency or who knows what. The other horrible possibility might be that you and your spouse suddenly come up, with a each with a diagnosis that affects your potential lifespan. Notice that I said and the spouse here, because if only one spouse is ill and the other one's in good health, the other one can still live to age 100, so you may still want to maximize the higher earning spouse. But there are some reasons that might change that would mean that you would want to undo the decision to wait to age 70. There's a limited do-over possible where you can backdate the application to the month of your full retirement age, or 6 months, whichever is shorter. So the SSA basically gives you a 6-month maximum window that you can decide that you want to, that you figure you made the wrong decision and you want to undo it. Going the other way, what happens for those folks who filed early and they want to undo that? If you change your mind within 12 months of claiming an early retirement, you can return all the payments and in essence pull the paperwork on that and then file later, getting the delayed retirement credits. That's a once in a lifetime thing. The other thing is you can wait until your full retirement age and not return the prior payments, but you can suspend your payments at your full retirement age, hang on to the early payments that you've received up to that point, and then get delayed credits from your full retirement age going forward. It won't be as much, obviously, when you reach age 70 as if you'd never filed early, but at least it's a partial redo. So there are some options to redo decisions. Some folks continue to work and want to know, past the retirement age or delay their retirement age and want to know how does that affect their Social Security. If you're claiming benefits before your full retirement age, you will lose $1 for every $2 earned above a $16,920 cap for 2017. The cap is adjusted with the CPI each year. If you wait until full retirement age, you only for those few months you only lose $1 for every $3 earned above a different cap. And after full retirement age, you do not lose. There's no reduction in benefits. You don't lose any of your Social Security benefits. You don't lose these per se. You get them back. You don't. They're taken out of the benefits that you get, but you get credit added in to the benefits that you get after full retirement age when you start collecting at that point. Frankly, for most people, I don't think it makes any sense at all to even consider taking Social Security benefits if your plan is to still work. Why complicate the heck out of the whole thing and make life difficult for yourself and for them? I guess maybe if you really, really needed the income as well as what you're getting from working, it might make sense. But for most people, you know, the cleanest, the obvious thing to do if you're working is to delay taking Social Security benefits. Yes. The question relates to if you're working, does that mean that you're working for a company or you're self-employed or perhaps getting income from the stock market or any other source? We're talking about income, I think, from all sources. Any income that you earn is going to be considered, it goes into this cap. And the cap is pretty low. No. The question relates to stock market gains. That probably. I'll be honest. I don't know the details on this. I don't recall, but I don't think that would be factored in. I don't know. Yes, another question. Oh, it is just earned income. Okay. Thank you. Earned income only. The other nice thing that happens is that your income from Social Security may be taxed. That's a little bit of a bummer. The first thing you have to do is calculate your combined income. The formula they give for combined income is that you go to your 1040 that you're filing this weekend, like everybody else, and you figure the adjusted gross income from that. You add back into that the non-taxable interest that's not taxed on your 1040, unless you're doing the AMT, from interest from munis and stuff like that, and you add in half of your Social Security income. So that's what they've defined as the combined income. And for individual filers, if that combined income is above $25,000, there's no tax. If it's in the range I've given you there's a 50% of the benefits are taxed. And it's above the $34,000, 85% of your Social Security income adds into your taxable income. For married couples, the same ratios apply. The numbers, the caps are a little bit different, but the same concept is there. So you can very well be paying taxes on 85% of your Social Security income. Any questions so far on this? Okay, we're going to switch to the other side of the coin, to Medicare. Medicare was enacted by Lyndon Johnson back in 1965, and most folks are familiar with the 4 parts, A, B, C, and D. Part A is the major medical hospitalization, and there's no premium charge for that. That's free insofar as you've paid for it in the 25, 30, 35, 40 years that you're working, you've been paying into your 1.45% of your paycheck, week after week, month after month. So that goes to cover your Part A premium. Part B is for doctor visits and outpatient care, and there is a premium charge for that. We'll talk about that in a minute. You're going to skip to Part D, which is prescription drugs, and there's a charge for that. That's only relatively recently. That came under George Bush. Part C is the Medicare Advantage plan, which is outside of the government Medicare, traditional Medicare program. It's run by private insurance companies, Aetna and all these other ones, Blue Cross Blue Shield, which normally, in most cases, covers Part A, B, and D. but sometimes they don't always cover Part D, so you need to check with them carefully. But it's meant to give you Medicare coverage outside of and independently of the traditional Medicare coverage. Part C, in order to enroll for Part C, you must be making Part B payments. You must continue to make your Part B payments. And the government, in essence, uses those to pay the private insurance companies on a capitated basis for the Advantage plans. And very often the Advantage charge on top of that. In the earlier years, they didn't charge a premium. There was no cost to move to an Advantage plan. But nowadays, I think most of them are charging something in the region of $100 a month on top of what you pay for the Part B. But you must continue to make the Part B payments. So everybody understand the basics, the fundamentals of Medicare before we get into the myths. Okay. Myth number 1, I can sign up anytime. Wrong. Medicare defines a 7-month window, which is the month of your 65th birthday and the 3 months on each side of it. And that's a very, very important window, because if you fail to sign up for Medicare in that window, you have the potential for being hit with what I consider a draconian penalty. The penalty is 1% per month for each month that you delay beyond your 65th birthday when you could have signed up. For example, if instead of signing up on the 65th birthday, you're saying, well, I'm going to delay my Social Security benefits until age 70, so I'm going to wait until then to sign up for Medicare. 5 years later, you go to sign up for Medicare, and you get hit with a 60% penalty for the rest of your life, period. The only out on that, and it's one that most people can use in practice, but you need to be aware of it and to kind of lock it in if you can, that if you're working during that time, your employer you're probably covered under your employer's plan, and if Social Security deems that to be, quote, a creditable plan, their words, not mine, then the penalty will no longer apply. And a creditable plan, on their definition, is a plan that's comparable to, that's at least as good as the traditional Medicare plan or better. But I'd kind of suggest that if you do fall into that category, that it's worth going to your HR department or wherever, making sure that the plan that they are offering is in fact deemed by the Medicare folks to be a creditable plan, and getting a letter from your HR department stating that. They should be, very familiar with being asked for this recognition, but it's a lot easier to get a letter at that point, and possibly even to go into the Social Security office at age 65 and tell them, I'm here now, I'm not claiming for Medicare yet, and here's a copy of the letter that I have showing I'm covered with a creditable plan, and get that out of the way so that at age 70 when you show up, you do not want at that point to get into an argument with Medicare as to whether you were covered by a creditable plan or not. You need it to be really, really clear, because if you lose the argument, it hurts. We have a question from the web.
This gentleman asks, I'm on Medicare, but my spouse is still working, so I did not sign up for the various supplements. Can I sign up for supplements at any time? Can I sign up if she were to lose her job and I was no longer covered by her company medical benefits? Or do I have to wait for the annual sign-up window?
This sounds to me like a compound question from the web. The question relates to a gentleman who is no longer working, but his spouse is working, I believe. And the question is, if she loses his job, can he sign up for various supplements at a later point? I think under those circumstances, I think the answer is yes. Yes, he can sign up later, but I'd love to think that at that point he had a letter in his hip pocket from his spouse's employer saying that he and she were both covered by a creditable plan for the intervening years, and therefore the penalty should not apply. It's a tough argument to get into if you don't have some supporting evidence. Question here.
What if that's 1% per month
The question relates to the 1% per month late in signing up. That's the penalty that you pay if you do not sign up at age 65 as Medicare wishes you to do. If you decide at age 65 that you do not want to sign up for Medicare, you do not want to bother making the Part B payments every month, that you don't need it, etc., you're healthy, etc., etc., Medicare takes a very dim view of this if you go along to them 2 or 3 years later and say, okay, I haven't been signed up for the last couple of years, I'd like to sign up now. Their position will be, we'd be glad to sign you up now, but we're going to charge you 1% extra for every month that you've delayed. So if you go 2 years later, they will charge you an extra 24% month after month after month for the rest of your life for what they would otherwise have done. Another question at the back. No? Yes?
Yeah, everybody 1% of what?
1% of the premium that you would otherwise pay. Question from the web.
This gentleman asks, how do you pay the Part B premium if you were not yet taking Social Security benefits?
The question says, how do you make the Part B premium payment if you are not yet taking Social Security benefits? First of all, most people that are taking Social Security benefits have the Part B premium automatically subtracted from their payment. If you are not yet taking the Social Security benefits, then you write a check to Medicare. I'm not sure if you can do it with a credit card or not, but you make payments outside of the Social Security system to them month after month. Any other questions? Okay. Move on to myth number 2. I'm a real healthy guy and I don't take any prescription drugs, so why should I bother signing up for Part D? I can do that later when I need the drugs. The exact, well, not quite the exact same draconian penalty applies for the same reasons. The penalty this time is 10% per annum. Instead of 1% a month, it's 10% per annum. So it may be worth considering, even if you're not taking any prescription drugs today, still making the Part D payments in case 10 years down the road you suddenly do need some heavy-duty prescription drugs and a fairly significant bill, because if you delay signing up for Part D, 10% per annum accrues pretty quickly. If you wait the 5 years to age 70, you're going to be paying a 50% penalty on the Part D. So it's a tough call, and some folks would argue that, well, I'll take my chance on that. I don't want to go making the payments every month for something I'm not using. But there's always the potential that things can change, and that's what insurance is all about. Again, if you're covered by a creditable plan, the penalty won't apply. Myth number 3. I've been making these horrible payments, the 1.45% into Medicare all my life for the last 40 years. So, I thought most was going to be free, but maybe there's a nominal charge. I understand that Part A is free, whatever that means now, but Part B, shouldn't be tagging me too much for that. For Part B in 2017, the current number, I believe, is $134 a month. But again, earlier in the workshop, they've started doing a means testing over the last roughly 10 years on the Part. Oh, I've got some real weird slow connection coming up here. I can't see. For the Part B payments, if your MAGI and your modified adjusted gross income, which is your adjusted gross income plus the tax-exempt interest added back into it, what Medicare does is go back and look at your tax returns from 2 years ago, which is the last they'll have. In other words, the payments you make in 2017, they will decide by looking at your 2015 tax returns, and they have access to these, and they look at your AGI, they look at your tax exempt interest, they'll add it back in, and if your MAGI is above certain limits, then you will pay, here's another great phrase, an income-related monthly adjustment amount, your IRMA. So there'll be an extra IRMA payment every month for Part B based on the means testing. I'll give you the amount of that in a couple of minutes. For Part D, for the drugs, the exact same argument goes. Again, they look at your tax records, and if your MAGI is beyond certain limits, you get tagged with a different IRMA for the Part D as well. Question from the web.
This gentleman asks, if you start Medicare at age 65 and later become eligible for medical insurance from an employer, can you stop Medicare payments?
Question is, if you become eligible for Medicare at age 65 and you start making the payments on schedule, and you later become employed and covered by presumably a creditable plan with your new employer, can you then stop making the Medicare payments? The answer is I don't have a clue. I don't know. I've not come across that situation, so I don't know. There's another good reason to go talk to the folks. Okay, what I've shown you here is what the IRMA looks like for the Part B and the Part D for the various income levels. For single folks making less than $85,000 and for couples making less than $170,000, there is no IRMA. The IRMA is zero, so you're making just the payments that I showed earlier. On the other hand, for those high earners, if you look at the bottom line, besides $134 a month for Part B and some amount for Part D, you can pay an IRMA of an additional $294 and change for Part B and an additional $76 and change for Part D. If you add all that up, you're talking about over $500 a month, which is over $6,000 a year. And for most folks, that's not chump change. It's a significant amount of money, but that's for the high earners. But it gives you some idea of what has happened over the last decade, because it's only in the last few years that any of this IRMA has crept into the system. The top line was the only one that existed when I retired 10 years ago, when I first retired. Next myth. Now that I've signed up, most of my costs are covered. I mean, paying all these dollars, got to be well covered. Well, yes and no. It pays a certain number of basic things, but there's a lot of stuff that's not covered. There's some significant deductions and co-payments, and when you're signed up, you get a half-inch thick book every year that tells you what's covered, or perhaps more importantly, what's not covered. And there's some big gaps, which is why most people find it useful to pay for an additional supplemental insurance, a Medigap policy, to cover the things that the traditional Medicare does not cover. The Medigap policies, there are actually, I think, 11 of them, the A, B, C, D, F star, and so on, have different coverages and they're priced differently. So you can pick and choose which of them you want or which of them suits you best. The coverage is standardized. The SSA has stepped in and said, here's what you must cover for Medigap A, here's what you must cover for B, and so on. But the premiums are not, so you can shop around for getting the lowest cost premium for whatever policy that you want. Just in passing, the difference between the F star and the F is that the F star is a high deductible version of F, which is, I think, something in the region of a $20,000 deductible. No, it's not, I don't remember. It's some very significant amounts of, it means the premium is fairly low, but you're paying medical costs up to that. The other thing that's kind of pertinent here is that if you're covered by a Part C Advantage plan, if you've elected to go that way instead, normally it will cover all of these things. And in fact, you cannot get a Medigap policy if you have an Advantage plan. I think if you try to get a Medigap, I think it kicks you out of the Advantage plan. So, the Advantage plan gives you fairly broad coverage over all the things that the supplemental Medigap policy covers from the traditional Medicare insurance. Yes?
Could you want to explain the difference between the Medicare supplemental plan and well, I already have a KBP, so I think it's about insurance. So when I turn 65, I'll have Medicare, and then I'll have a plan to have health care to effectively retire.
The question relates to just what does a Medigap supplemental insurance policy cover, and how does that relate to an Advantage plan? The Medigap policies are designed to fill in some of the gaps in traditional Medicare. Traditional Medicare is kind of a safety net, but there are big holes that could be quite expensive if you fall into one of them. And the Medigap policies mean that for an extra 50 or 100 bucks a month or whatever, most of those are filled, and it makes it look more like a traditional. An Advantage, the Part C Advantage plan, you can think of that as being the same as a Part A, B, and C plan with a Medigap. It covers all of the things that you would normally have covered, and is very, very similar to the plan that most from a major employer. There aren't any major gaps in it, but you'll probably pay an extra premium for it. And for some people, it may be worth it. One of the constraints of going with an Advantage plan is that you're usually tied to particular providers, preferred providers. In traditional Medicare, you can theoretically go to any doctor anywhere, in the US at least. However, having said that, you may run into doctors that kind of say, well, all our Medicare slots are filled and we're not taking any more Medicare patients, because Medicare reimburses, I don't know, 20 or 30 cents on the dollar, and not all doctors will always take Medicare.
You wouldn't go to the doctor, but they accept okay.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm showing here is, don't think that just because you're making your Medicare premium that you're covered for anything that could possibly happen. There are big gaps in it. You need to know where those gaps are and see if they're likely to apply to you or not, and how you're going to deal with them. Myth number 5, I'm covered by Medicare, so done deal, no problem. Problem with Medicare is that it stops the moment you go outside the U.S. There's zero coverage once you set foot off U.S. soil. You can go whatever state you want within the U.S. and even go to Alaska and be covered. But if you go to England or Europe or French West Africa, forget it, you're not covered. So if you want to be, if you'd like to travel, you can pick one of the supplemental plans that cover foreign travel, that cover travel outside or medical emergencies outside the U.S. And I've listed the one, not all of the supplemental plans do, but I've listed the ones that do cover medical care outside the U.S. Be aware that plans A, B, K, and L do not cover travel and emergencies outside the U.S. And if you're one of those plans, you probably should consider additional insurance before you travel. The question is, if you live abroad after age 65, there should be no need to apply for Medicare and does it make sense, I guess, to just ignore them? I think you can probably do that, but recognize that if you ever set foot back in the U.S. again and want to change your mind, then you're going to get tagged with the draconian penalties we talked about at the beginning. And you also want to keep in mind that although Medicare can be expensive, it's still subsidized to some extent by the U.S. government, and the subsidized value of it may still be better than the cost of buying insurance abroad. You need to compare them to see. It might still possibly be a better deal than the insurance you can get separately, but I don't know. Myth number 6. Medicare will take care of my long-term care needs. I talked about long-term care in one of the previous workshops, and a lot of folks think that Medicare covers it. They don't. It's one of the major gaps in Medicare. They got extremely limited coverage for 90 days, useless, and that's only after you've been hospitalized. 90 days is the normal elimination period on a true long-term care policy, where you say, well, I can pay the first 90 days myself, but I'm worried about the 91st day through the 10th year. And Medicare doesn't cover any of that. So, folks should give serious consideration to buying a separate long-term care policy. And, I regard that as one of the major train wrecks. We talked about it in one of the previous workshops. Even if you've worked really hard at putting together a viable retirement plan and you've factored in every spreadsheet number that you could find and cranked everything, and you think that you got everything all nicely lined up, a long-term care illness can pull the bottom brick on that really quickly, because you're looking at major expenses. It could be a couple of $100 a day for long-term care in an assisted living facility. And even though the average stay in a long-term care facility is, I think, in the region of 2 to 3 years, and you say, well, I can afford that. That's the average, folks. What about if you happen to be fairly fit physically and have mental incapacity where you live for another 10, 15, 20 years? How many of those years can you afford at $200 a day? So I think long-term care is a potential train wreck, and I suggest that folks that covered it managing your cash flow in retirement and review those. The second train wreck, by the way, is liability. If you get sued because your teenage son T-boned a carload of surgeons on the way home from lunch or something like that, and you get tagged for multi-million-dollar suit, that again can pull one of your bottom bricks on your great plan really quickly. So those two train wrecks I think you should consider. But Medicare, do not look to Medicare as one of the solutions. It isn't.
The comment on the bullet about 90 days.
Yes.
That's only been here in the inpatient. I don't know if they do the observations now.
Yeah.
There's 4 nights out, they said, oh, there's no short-term stay. Easy. Under observation, not medication.
Yeah. The listener says that the comments that the 90 days only applies if you're an inpatient, for the hospitalization. Yes. Now Medicare, it's a really stingy requirement, and they will hold you to the letter of the law on it. Did I skip one? No. Myth number 7 relates to health savings accounts. Health savings accounts are the greatest thing since sliced bread for those folks who are eligible for them. They're basically triple tax advantage. You get a tax deduction for the contributions you make to the plan. The earnings are tax-free, and the withdrawals for medical purposes are not taxed. So it's a great, it's a great plan. But there are constraints. First of all, the requirement said that you must have a high deductible health insurance plan. In other words, the health savings accounts are meant to cover the deductible portion of a high deductible plan. They've defined what they mean by that. And you must not be on Medicare And I've given you the limits here on the contribution amounts. You can contribute up to $3,400 per annum for single and $6,750 for a couple. There's $1,000 per annum for those over age 65. But you must not you have to be very, very careful that you don't accidentally go on Medicare, because they'll pull the plug on this for you. And the easiest way to hit that tripcord would be if you're taking early Social Security benefits, say at age 62 or 63 or something like that. If you're enrolled in the Social Security benefits and you hit age 65, the SSA is automatically going to enroll you in Medicare. And at that point, you will get kicked out of your HSA. And I guess the bad news is you can no longer make contributions. However, the good news is you will still be able to make withdrawals from anything that you have accumulated in the trust up to that point. But HSAs and Medicare do not mix. They're specifically excluded. Okay, so that's the last of the myths. Let me talk real quickly, we're getting close on time here, about some of the challenges. We've looked at the payments that are being made into Medicare and into Social Security over the years, how they've changed. We've looked at how the environment has changed. We said that the 3 workers that we're currently looking at is projected to go down to 2.2 workers per retiree by 2030. And the strain on the system is such that the OASDI, the part of it that we normally think of as Social Security, that trust fund is projected to run out by 2034, if not earlier. And they may have updated that. It doesn't mean that when that runs out that you get nothing. It means that you're living totally off the income from it, and there's nothing left in the trust fund to supplement that. So the benefits will drop, or projected to drop to 70% of the current levels. The SSI, the Supplemental Insurance Program, is already borrowing from the OSDI. Their costs, medical costs in general, not just Medicare, medical costs in general are rising faster than, the inflation level goes faster than the CPI. So there's a real convergence on a bunch of issues becoming serious problems over the next decade. None of the solutions for this is pretty. I mean, the only one that's halfway pretty is the last one, is the hoary own, well, we're going to eliminate fraud and abuse. We'll fix the problem that way. Every politician in the world will tell you that, but the reality is all the ones above it, they're pretty ugly. One thing being considered is to bump up the 15.3% FICA rate. That's pretty high already, especially for those who are self-employed and paying both sides of it. Another possibility, or even eliminate the cap that's currently at $127,000 for the income that you can earn that's taxed at that rate. One of the things that I mentioned earlier with a couple of question marks is that the full retirement age may get bumped up above 67, may go to 68 or 69 or whatever in the future. Means testing may become common. The COLAs can change. Premiums for Medicare Parts A and B are likely to continue to go up. They've been going up every year so far, and there's no reason why that's not going to continue. There's talk that the Medicare age should get bumped up from age 65. If the retirement age has gone up from 65, 66, 67, and possibly beyond that, and people are working beyond that, should the Medicare age go beyond 65 to try and save some bucks? Should the Medicare benefits be reduced? Coverage, a reduction in coverage. So none of these is a pretty solution. There are probably other ones as well. And the folks back in Washington are going to have a real challenge in figuring how to pick and choose from this in the most palatable form, and how they're going to present it to us John Doe public. Having said all that, I want to go back to something that I said right at the very beginning. Social Security and Medicare issues are truly very complicated, and everything we've discussed tonight is a whole mess of fine print that I haven't even gotten into, and be aware of it. You need to talk to a real expert, and what I've done tonight hopefully is stimulate some questions in your mind and give you some notion of what strategies are possible to look at. But please, if you're making any decisions that talk about serious dollars, talk to a real expert. I've given you a bunch of references, additional reading. Most of these are from the AAII journal, but there are a bunch of other ones out there. The two books at the bottom are actually kind of neat. I like them. The Oblivious Investor is a guy called Mike Piper who runs a blog on the web, but he's got a little paperback book that I think he charges $10 for. It's very simple, but it's Social Security made simple. It's already been updated for all of the changes that came in from the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015. I think you can go on Amazon.com or something and get that for about $10. Another book that I kind of like is Jane Bryan Quinn's How to Make Your Money Last. There's some chapters at the end of that covers a whole bunch of retirement issues that actually covers a lot of the total workshops that I've been doing for the past few months, but it includes chapters on Social Security and Medicare. Giving you some websites here that might be useful to look at. Well, let's look at the Social Security website. Those folks who have not yet signed up for the Social Security website, I encourage you to do the My Social Security thing. They're a little bit finicky for obvious reasons on identity theft, so they make you jump through some hoops in signing up. But it's worthwhile doing it because you've got a lot of flexibility rather than just waiting for your statements to come for those folks who are still working. You can go on the website. The other thing they have is the retirement calculator, which is useful for those folks that are still working. And finally, we have my mandatory cartoon. Just what exactly is your generation going to do about my Social Security? I like that one. Any questions? Any wrap-up questions? One question here.
So, with the proceeds from the HSA account, can you use that for premiums for Medicare?
Question relates to the proceeds from an HSA account. Can you use it to make the payments for your Medicare Part B, or I guess Part D? I think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure. It basically must be used for medical purposes, and I think that would probably qualify, but I'm not certain. Any question at the back? The question relates to the previous discussion on long-term care policy. It actually was a few slides relating to long-term care that was part of the other talk on, I'm not sure where, it doesn't matter where. If you go to our website, to the local chapter website that's on the front page of the handouts, it's www.siliconvalleyaaii.org. If you go to that website, you'll have access to the slides and a recording for all of the talks, and it includes the one that has a few slides on long-term care, which I think was number 4 or 5 or something. It was the one dealing with managing your cash flow in retirement. Okay. Any other issues? Question here. the question relates to somebody who's a part-time worker employee at Apple and has some benefits from Apple. And the question comes up as to whether which of them is considered, is the Apple plan or Medicare considered the primary provider, or how does the assignment work? I don't honestly know. I think Medicare is normally primary, and I think the Apple is probably secondary, but I really am not sure. Well, if that's it, folks, thank you.